The 14th of November, 1944. Outside Metz, France, 4:47 in the morning. Private Eddie Korzeniewski was counting his toes. 19 years old. Buffalo, New York, East Side. His father worked steel. His mother packed pierogi. He had been in the foxhole for 6 days. The water was 4 inches deep. The ground was clay. It would not drain. He counted his toes. He could feel 7 of them. The other 3 had stopped reporting in. He had not pulled off the boot in 3 days. The medic had told him, "Take that boot off out here. You do not put it back on." He had asked about dry socks. The medic had laughed, not unkindly. There were no dry socks. There had not been dry socks in the 90th Infantry Division for 11 days. Eddie pulled out a photograph, wrapped in oilcloth. His sister Stella, holding a kitten. He looked at it for a long time. He listened. 12 miles behind him in the rear, somewhere through the rain, a 3rd Army field kitchen was serving hot coffee. A field hospital was operating. A supply officer was filing paperwork about boot allocations. And 12 miles directly behind Eddie's foxhole, in a French chateau with 73 rooms, a group of American officers were waking up, in beds, real beds, with sheets. They were going to drink champagne with breakfast. Eddie did not know about the chateau. Eddie did not know that 90 miles north, General George S. Patton, Jr. had just read a medical report. A single number circled in red pencil. 12,000 cases of trench foot. 12,000 boys like Eddie. Patton had folded the paper, put it in his pocket, turned to his driver. He had said 5 words. "Get the Jeep. We're driving." This is what happened next. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the stories about World War II, where the gap between the men who fought and the men who managed them got dangerously wide, and the generals who refused to look the other way, because what Patton was about to do at the Château de Beaufort would empty 73 rooms by sunset. Every morning at 0600, a report landed on Patton's desk. 3 columns, killed in action, wounded in action, and 1 line at the bottom, trench foot, October 31st. 814 cases. November 7th, 3,200. November 14th, 12,046. Let me tell you what that number means. Trench foot is not frostbite. Frostbite freezes tissue. Trench foot is slower. The blood vessels constrict. Nerves die first, then skin, then muscle, then bone. In the early stages, you can save the foot. In the late stages, you cut it off. That November, the 3rd Army was averaging 73 amputations per week. Boys who had not been shot, not been bombed, not been hit by a single piece of German metal. They had simply been left in the mud. Now, here is the part that matters. Most rear-echelon officers were good men. The Quartermaster Corps ran convoys under artillery fire. The medics worked 20-hour shifts. The G4 logistics chain stretched 4,000 miles back to Detroit. Patton's own logistics chief, Colonel Walter Muller, slept on a cot, ate from a mess tin, worked 17-hour days. Mueller was the rule. The Château de Beaufort was the exception. But it was an exception that was killing boys, because an army runs on belief. The boy in the foxhole has to believe. He has to believe the supply truck is coming. He has to believe the officer above him is suffering with him. He has to believe the men sending him forward are not, that same evening, dining on roast pheasant and 1,937 champagne. If he stops believing, the army stops fighting. In October, Patton had issued General Order Number 98. One sentence mattered. Officers will share the discomforts of their men. There will be no exceptions. In his diary on November 12th, 2 days before the chateau, he wrote a single line. "Found rear echelon staff living like kings while my boys freeze. Will not tolerate." A wounded sergeant in Nancy had laughed bitterly to one of Patton's staff officers. He had said, "The champagne is moving faster than the boots." Patton had written that sentence on a yellow note card. He kept it on his desk for 2 days. Then he picked it up, put it in his breast pocket, buttoned the pocket, and he walked outside to find the Jeep. Sergeant Danny McGrath had driven Patton for 241 days. 34 years old, South Boston. 6 years on the police force before the war. Robbery and burglary. He thought there was nothing left that could surprise him. He was about to be wrong. The drive took 3 hours. Mud, craters, Convoys backed up for miles. McGrath threaded the jeep through gaps that did not technically exist. The general did not speak. McGrath watched the general's hands. The hands told you everything. When Patton was about to chew a man out, the hands were loose. When Patton was about to do something he had thought about for a long time, the hands were folded, right over left, resting on his knee, perfectly still. This morning the hands were folded. McGrath drove faster. They crossed the Moselle, climbed a low ridge. The rain stopped for the first time in 9 days. Pale sun, watery, without warmth. Then they came around a bend. McGrath saw the chateau. He slowed the jeep without being told. 3 stories of pale gold limestone, a slate roof, a working fountain in the courtyard, an honest-to-God working fountain. There were 2 Cadillacs parked in the gravel, both with U.S. Army markings. McGrath, who had spent the morning watching ambulances claw through clay, looked at those Cadillacs for a long moment. He pulled the jeep up to the main entrance, parked it, blocking one of the Cadillacs. Deliberately, he killed the engine. The silence was immediate. The chateau was 12 miles behind the line. You could not hear the artillery. You could not hear the trucks. You could hear birds. McGrath had not heard birds in 3 weeks. The general stepped down, adjusted his helmet, checked both sidearms, buttoned his coat. He turned to McGrath. 1 sentence. Stay with the jeep. Whatever you hear, you stay with the jeep. The general walked to the door. He did not ring the bell. He turned the handle. The door was unlocked. He walked inside. McGrath stood beside the jeep. He listened. 30 seconds. Nothing. Then a sound from an upper window. Laughter. A man's laughter. Comfortable. The clink of glass. McGrath crossed his arms. He had a feeling the laughter from that window was about to stop. All at once. And not start again for a very long time. Lieutenant Colonel Howard Briggs was finishing his coffee. 41 years old. Princeton. Class of 1925. He had married into a Philadelphia banking family. 2 daughters at the Baldwin School. He played squash on Tuesdays. He had spent 2 years in London, approving requisition forms, attending receptions. The Army had placed him exactly where it thought he would do the least damage. He had moved into the Château de Beaufort on October 11th. The arrangement was off the books. The wine cellar had come with it. It was a very good cellar. This morning he was hosting breakfast for 2 visiting officers, Colonel Hetherington from Paris, Major Walsh from Reims. The breakfast room faced south. 8 windows, the walls paneled in walnut, a fire in the fireplace. Everything was warm. The table was set for 3, linen tablecloth, polished silver, bone china with the chateau's coat of arms, a platter of pastries, cold ham, soft cheese, real butter in a porcelain dish. In the center, in a silver ice bucket, a half-empty bottle of 1937 Bollinger champagne. It had been opened at 7:30. Hetherington had insisted. He was, in his own words, a man who believed in celebrating small victories. Briggs had refilled his glass. Now they were discussing the Thanksgiving menu. The caretaker had located turkey in Nancy. There was a question of stuffing. Briggs listened politely. He thought about his daughters. He thought about the squash club back home. He thought vaguely about the 3,000 men under his administrative command. He did not know any of them by name. He had read, 2 days earlier, a medical report about Trenchfoot. He had stamped it, initialed it, filed it. The appropriate subordinate had assured him boot requisitions were in progress. In Briggs's 2 years in the Quartermaster Corps, almost everything had been in progress. He reached for another pastry. He heard the main door open downstairs. He did not look up. The chateau had visitors all morning. Then he heard footsteps, heavy field boots, climbing the marble stairs without hurry. The footsteps reached the second-floor landing. They came down the corridor. They stopped outside the breakfast room. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway. 4 silver stars on his helmet. Pearl-handled revolver on his right hip. Briggs felt the coffee pot grow heavy in his hand. Hetherington stopped talking mid-sentence. The champagne bottle gave off a single small bubble. It broke in the silence with a soft sound that was, in that perfectly still moment, the loudest noise the 3 officers had ever heard. Briggs set the coffee pot down. His hand was shaking. Patton did not speak first. He took off his gloves, 1 finger at a time. He tucked them into his belt. Hurrying was for men who were uncertain. Hetherington half rose from his chair. He had been an officer long enough to know you stand for a 4-star general. He had not been an officer long enough to know you do not speak first. General Patton. What an unexpected pleasure. May we offer you— Patton's eyes moved to him. Hetherington stopped talking. Patton's eyes moved back to Briggs. Stand up. Briggs stood up. His chair scraped against the parquet floor. Walsh stood. Then Hetherington. Patton walked the length of the table. Slowly. He examined the platter of ham. He examined the cheese. He picked up the porcelain butter dish. Limoges. He set it down with exact care. He stopped at the ice bucket. He read the label. Bollinger, Etusine, Onihundred, Osuvoctrediu. He turned to Briggs. Which one of you ordered this? Sir. The bottle was provided by the chateau. From the cellar. We did not requisition. Did you pay for it? It was a gift, sir. From the caretaker. Patton nodded. Once. He reached into his breast pocket, took out a folded paper, held it up, so Briggs could see it. A 3rd Army Medical Department report. A single number circled in red pencil. Do you know what that number is, Colonel? Sir, I would have to consult the document. Do not lie to me. Briggs closed his mouth. That number is the boys in this army with trench foot. As of 400 this morning. Every one of them is in a foxhole, or a hospital, or a grave. Because the boots they were promised did not arrive. He paused. A wounded sergeant told one of my staff officers a sentence. 2 days ago. The champagne is moving faster than the boots. He looked at the table. Tell me to my face that the sergeant was wrong. Briggs could not speak. Patton waited 10 seconds. Then he said, an officer who eats while his men go hungry is no officer of mine. He turned toward the door. Sergeant McGrath. McGrath stepped into the room. Clipboard ready. Take down the following order. Patton's eyes did not move from Briggs's face. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. Quartermaster Corps. Relieved of command. Effective immediately. Transfer to a forward depot. Within 24 hours. Same order applies to Colonel Hetherington. Major Walsh. The chateau vacated by 1800 hours. All consumables inventoried. Distributed to frontline units. Tonight, he paused. One more line. The Bollinger goes to the 90th Infantry Division. Specifically, tonight. In the hands of a private. The dirtiest private. In the dirtiest foxhole on the line. He looked at Briggs one last time. There are boys in foxholes counting their toes tonight, Colonel. I hope you never sleep again without thinking of them. He walked out. Sergeant McGrath had carried that clipboard for 241 days. He had never written down anything like what he had just written down. He walked downstairs to find a stenographer. He found one in the kitchen. Corporal Margaret Steinke from Milwaukee, 23 years old. He told her the general needed her upstairs. She did not ask questions. 5 minutes later, she was in the breakfast room. Steno pad open. 3 officers sat at the main table. None of them were eating. Patton had walked out of the chateau. He had not gotten back in the jeep. He was standing at the fountain, hands behind his back, looking at the water. McGrath understood. The general was not leaving. He was making them write the letter while he waited. That was the point. That was the whole point. McGrath had been a cop long enough to recognize a punishment when he saw one. The transfer was the small part. The letter was the big part. Because Patton understood something about men. A man can survive almost anything if he can lie to himself about it. A man cannot survive what he has written down. Briggs sat at the table, a blank sheet of paper in front of him. His own paper, his own Mont Blanc fountain pen. He had signed 300 requisition orders with that pen. He was now being asked to use it for something else. The general's instructions had been specific. Write a letter to the family of the next boy in this army to lose a foot. Describe this room. Describe this table. Describe what was on it. Sign your name. Briggs picked up the pen. He uncapped it. He stared at the paper for 3 minutes. Then he began to write. The pen moved slowly, sometimes steadily, sometimes in long pauses. McGrath stood in the corridor. He listened. Once he heard a small choked sound from inside the room. He kept his eyes on the wall opposite him. 57 minutes later, the pen stopped. McGrath stepped back into the room. The letter was on the table. 6 pages of careful, slanted handwriting. The last line read, I do not know who will read this. I do not know if anyone will. But it is true. And I have written it down. And I am the man who did this. McGrath folded the letter. sealed it. He turned to the three officers. "Gentlemen, you have 5 hours to vacate this chateau." He walked out. The general was still at the fountain. McGrath stopped 4 paces behind him. After a moment, the general said, without turning around, "Did he write it?" "Six pages, sire." The general was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Good." He walked to the jeep. The order traveled fast. By sunset on November 14th, every rear-echelon officer in 3rd Army had heard the story. Within 72 hours, Briggs was on a truck headed northeast to a forward supply depot near the German border. 1 duffel bag, Mont Blanc pen, Bar Harbor postcards, the silver flask his Princeton classmates had given him in 1925. He did not unpack at the depot. He worked. 6 months. In the mud. He inventoried boots. He inspected truck axles. He slept in a Quonset hut with 12 other officers. He ate from a mess tin. He did not complain. He requested an honorable discharge in May 1945. It was granted. He returned to Philadelphia. He did not go back to the bank. He did not return to the squash club. He sold the Bar Harbor house in 1947. He taught French literature at a small Quaker school for 26 years. He never spoke publicly about the war. The Château de Beaufort was vacated by 1800 hours, exactly as ordered. The wine cellar was inventoried that evening. 400 bottles, loaded onto trucks, distributed to frontline units over the next 4 nights. Most were not drunk. The bottles became unofficial currency. Some were saved, taken home, opened decades later at weddings. A few of those bottles still exist today. Within 10 days, Patton issued General Order 103. Expanded version of 98. New provisions. No officer permitted to occupy quarters materially better than the men under his command. No gifts from local civilians. Some staff officers requested transfers to the front. Some of those officers were killed in the Battle of the Bulge. Their names are on the rolls of the American Battle Monuments Commission. The trench foot numbers stopped climbing on December 1st. They began to fall on December 15th. The new winter combat boots arrived at frontline units in significant quantities by Christmas. Eddie Korzeniewski received a pair on the 11th of December, 1944. He kept them for the rest of his life. November 15th. 2:30 in the morning. The rain has stopped. Eddie Korzeniewski hears boots. A quartermaster sergeant crouches at the edge of his foxhole, hands down 2 pairs of dry wool socks, a pair of overshoes, a K-ration, and a bottle, dark green glass, gold foil at the neck, French lettering. "Orders, kid," the general said. "The dirtiest private in the dirtiest foxhole on the line. Tonight." Eddie does not understand. He pulls off his boots, peels off the rotting socks, pulls on the dry wool, the overshoes, dry feet for the first time in 11 days. He looks at the bottle. He does not open it. He understands, in the way 19-year-old boys sometimes understand things they cannot put into words, that this bottle is not for drinking. This bottle is a message. The message is, "You are seen." He wraps the bottle in the oilcloth, tucks it deep into his pack. He cries, not loudly, with his hand over his mouth, so the boy in the next hole will not hear. Then he stops. Eddie came home in October 1945, married Helen Wojcik in 1947, 4 children, 38 years at Bethlehem Steel. He kept the boots in the attic. He kept the bottle wrapped in oilcloth. He never told anyone what either of them meant. So here is the question: when you sit in a warm room, and the men whose lives depend on your paperwork are 12 miles away, in the mud, counting their toes, do you remember them, or do you forget them? What would you have done if you were Patton? What would you have done if you were Briggs? And the hardest one of all, what are you not asking yourself, right now, about the people 12 miles from your own warm room? Let us know in the comments below, because there is always a foxhole, and there is always a boy in it.